You bit your lip, buried your teeth into your tongue, puffed out your cheeks and bit the insides of them. You kept your mouth shut for a long time, perhaps too long you supposed, as you watched a familiar head of wild green hair walk past you along with Ida and Uraraka. You held your breath, closed your eyes, clenched your teeth. You wondered if things would have been different had you swallowed your damn fears and said something. Your eyes followed him as far as they could before he was just too far away. You took in a deep breath and started walking. You had no real idea where. You kept moving until you were stepping inside of a cafe just off campus. Your ears perked up at the sound of Midoriya's voice and Uraraka's laughter, followed by a brief lecture from Ida. You turned to see the trio seated in one of the booths. Midoriya's face turned to the entrance of the cafe, but you were already gone. You closed your eyes, gnawed at your nails, and rolled your tongue against the roof of your mouth. You waited for the pedestrian walk light to show before crossing the street, walking away from the cafe. As you did, you didn't notice Midoriya looking out of the entrance. He deflated when he spotted you walking away. Ida and Uraraka came up behind him to ask why he'd gotten up so fast.
I don't get it. I was certain they went here every day.
Midoriya sighed. Uraraka placed a hand on his shoulder.
I even asked Ashido to be sure.
Maybe we'll see them later. Don't give up yet, Deku.
She reassured him. He put on a determined face, nodding in agreement. You strolled into a familiar shop, smiling at the clerk who recognized you straight away, corralling you into an aisle of books with their newest releases. You skimmed the covers with your eyes, reaching out to pull a book out and flip through the pages every now and then. A book with skeletal cats and a red and black color scheme caught your eye, and you picked it up, opening it to look through it. In your distracted state, smiling down at the pictures of cats above each page of text, you almost didn't catch three familiar voices as they wandered into the shop. Midoriya approached the front desk, and the clerk greeted all three of the students, asking what they were looking for. As they were distracted, you shut the book and placed it back on the shelf, holding your breath as you discreetly slipped out of the shop, making eye contact with the clerk on your way out, who seemed to realize what was going on.
Actually, we're looking for a friend. We were told they came through here often,
Midoriya admitted sheepishly, hands wringing anxiously as the woman placed a hand to her chin as if to think.
You wouldn't happen to have seen them today, have you?
Are they the quiet one? Traveler, I think it was. She wondered, and Midoriya perked up at the sound of your name.
Yes, that's them.
He smiled, eyes bright and hopeful, and the clerk couldn't help but smile back.
Well, I'm afraid you just missed them. Sorry, kid.
Oh. Midoriya shrank a little, clearly dejected by the news, and once again Uraraka comforted him, a hand on his back as he racked his brain for another solution.
Well, they couldn't have gone far, right?
The three exited the store in search of the ghost of you. You arrived at your final routinely spot of the day, smiling at the blissfully unoccupied picnic table tucked away at the edge of the park just by the forest, separated by a leaning chain-link fence. You looked up at the dimming sky, the slight smell of rain and wood calming your nerves. You slid onto the rotting wooden bench of the picnic table, pulling your knees to your chest in a comfortable balled-up position. You pulled down your hood and pulled out your phone, putting in your earbuds and looking up at the sky, watching the sun draw ever closer to setting, waiting for the stars to come out. Just as the green-haired boy started to worry that he had already missed you, he spotted your small form at a picnic table at the edge of the park. He let out a sigh of relief at the sight of you, sitting still and not walking away. He grabbed Ida's and Uraraka's attention, pointing to you, and they looked equally relieved to have finally caught up to you after a whole day of hunting.
Well, I'm afraid this is where we part. Midoriya, I hope all goes well with Traveler.
Ida saluted, and the other two chuckled at their friend's eccentric behavior.
Thank you, Ida. I appreciate your help today.
Midoriya thanked him, bowing his head in gratitude and waving at him as he left the park to walk back on campus. Uraraka turned to face him and gestured for him to take a deep breath with her, knowing how nervous he must be.
You've got this, Deku. I believe in you.
She whisper-shouted, raising her hand to offer a fist pump, which he gratefully accepted. Once Uraraka was out of sight, Midoriya turned around and started to make his way towards the relaxed shape of you.
Oh, okay. Big breaths.
He muttered to himself as he approached you, one big ball of anxiety. He stopped a few feet away, just to admire you as you watched the sky without a care in the world, a small smile on your lips as your eyes traveled from star to star.
You can do this.
He tried to pep himself up, though the moment you shifted, he froze and almost dashed off. You uncurled from your ball and stretched your limbs out, turning your head away from the sky to change the song on your phone when you noticed a shadow looming over you. You knitted your brows together in confusion and turned around, heart leaping into your throat and forcing a gasp from it as you spotted Midoriya a few feet away, who stiffened as well when he met your wide eyes. You removed your earbuds and pulled your knees back up to your chest, mouth opening several times to ask what he was doing here, but each time you clamped it back shut.
Hey, Traveler. Fancy seeing you here. I was just looking, passing through.
Midoriya babbled with a nervous smile, trying to formulate a proper sentence. Though, finally, talking to you face to face suddenly became more difficult than he remembered.
What are you doing out here all by yourself?
You bit your tongue, held your breath, clenched your teeth. Anything to keep the words from spilling. Words you've kept down for months. You couldn't just say nothing, though.
Hey, Midoriya,
is all you could manage before biting down on your tongue again, avoiding his eyes. You knew it was not enough to weasel out of the conversation, so you added.
Don't worry about me. I should be going now anyway.
Midoriya's eyes widened when you stood up from the picnic table, shoving your phone in your pocket, ready to leave. He panicked, racking his brain for the right words to say to stop you. Instead, his hand shot out before he could stop it, and grabbed yours.
No, please, don't go yet.
He blurted out, sounding desperate as you halted all movement and looked back at him with wide eyes. Your gaze drifted between his face and his hands as it grasped yours, lips parted in surprise.
Can we talk for a minute?
Why? Why does he want to talk now? What could you possibly have that he wanted to talk to you about after months of distance? Almost a year of growing apart until you had no part in his life. You gestured at his grip on your fingers, and he turned bright red, flushing from his neck to his ears. He jerked his hand away from yours and squeezed out a,
Sorry!
Despite your conscience, the voice telling you to just leave, You sat back down on the rotting bench, looking expectantly at him as he stood there.
Are you going to sit down?
You asked flatly, and the boy jumped with a
Right.
scrambling to sit down beside you. It was quiet.
Traveler?
Midoriya started out, and you grimaced at the sound, not liking the way each syllable fell from his lips in that nervous voice of his.
Don't act like we're familiar.
You hissed, letting the annoyance slip out into your tone. He stared for a moment, and you didn't miss the hurt that flashed behind those big green eyes of his. He looked like he wanted to say something but couldn't quite find the words. Why did it make you feel bad that you had plenty of things to say, and he had none?
Where? Not?
Midoriya asked, the sound small in his throat. What were you talking about? Don't act like we're familiar? The green-haired boy vividly remembered a time when you were very close, and he was the only one that was allowed to use your first name, the only one that could talk to you longer than 5 minutes without you closing off. You used to come over for play dates at his house and build blanket forts so you could read All Might comics and share dumb secrets. He couldn't think of a time he wasn't familiar with you, even if you had grown apart since you started high school. You still kept in touch over text, and he invited you over to study every now and then. But now that he thought of it, he couldn't remember the last time he texted you. He couldn't recall the last time you had a meaningful conversation outside or inside of school. But even if you didn't see each other as much, he still considered you his friend. And he had been crushing on you since middle school. Had you really become unfamiliar with one another? You hadn't been close lately, sure, but hearing you say that hurt his feelings.
Oh, don't act surprised.
You groaned, looking up at the sky. Did he really expect things to just be okay between you after basically ghosting you for almost a year?
This is the first time you've talked to me in months.
Your words hit him hard, and he could feel the guilt crawling on his skin. He felt sick. He realized just how true your words were when he tried to remember a time you talked in the past few months but couldn't. It really had been that long.
I'm sorry about that. I guess I was just busy trying to become the #1 hero, you know?
He chuckled nervously, offering you a smile, hoping that maybe it would lift your spirits, or at least make you look at him.
You never seemed too busy for Uraraka or Ida.
You deadpanned, resting your chin on your hand as you leaned over the picnic table. Midoriya's eyes widened, and he tried to think of what to say, though he should have picked his words a bit more carefully, because the next sentence even made him wince as soon as it came out.
But that's different,
Midoriya stuttered, squinting his eyes shut and mentally kicking himself. What kind of excuse was that?
How is it different?
You asked. He couldn't even answer you. What was he supposed to say? It wasn't different. You were all in the same class. He had countless opportunities to talk to you, and he just didn't.
I'm sorry. That's no excuse.
He hung his head low, owning up to it.
Sorry for what? Not talking to me for months, or thinking that you could just walk up to me and be all buddy-buddy again?
You had to admit that it sounded harsh, and perhaps you were being petty. But could he really blame you? You spent most of your childhood only sharing his attention with Ka-chan, and suddenly there was no room in his life for you.
Well, you could have talked to me too. You haven't necessarily been the most sociable either.
He mumbled, twiddling his thumbs together.
Oh, so now it's my fault.
He sat up straight, raising his hands defensively as you scowled at him from over your shoulder, the bitterness of your tone sending him into panic mode. He hadn't meant it that way. He would never blame you for this.
No, that's not what I meant at all.
Midoriya sputtered.
Traveler, please hear me out.
Don't call me that.
You corrected, and Midoriya felt himself choke on the lump in his throat, and the tears started to well up in his eyes. He didn't want to cry in front of you. He'd done that all the time when he was younger, and not once did you hesitate to comfort him no matter what he was crying about. Crying would solve nothing now.
Traveler, please. I know you're mad at me and you have every right to be, but please don't do this. You've always been an amazing friend to me. Please don't shut me out now.
He whimpered, the tears starting to drip down his freckled cheeks.
You're the one who shut me out. Don't twist things to fit into whatever narrative your imagination has written up.
You hissed.
I didn't. You kept saying that like I'm not trying to fix this. I care about you. And just because you stopped believing it doesn't make it untrue.
Midoriya insisted.
Fix what? Our friendship that you forgot about?
You scoffed, putting some distance between you on the bench. The resentment in your eyes as you said it shook him to the core, terrifying him. The thought of you hating him made him actually want to throw up. He felt nauseous just thinking about it.
Please. Please.
He choked on a sob.
Please don't hate me. Please don't hate me.
You stared down at the wooden patterns of the picnic table, trying to ignore the pathetic sobs and sniffles to your right. You hated seeing Midoriya cry. You could remember a time you would have thrown hands for anyone who made him cry. It bugged you even now that you were the cause of his tears, but you were hurt too. A new amount of tears could fix that. You didn't hate him. You hated that this was what your long-term friendship had come to.
I haven't been a part of your life since we started high school, Izuku. Do you have any idea how I felt when we stopped talking? I thought that you were getting bored of me, that somehow I just wasn't worth your time anymore.
You confessed, feeling the tears start to form in your own eyes. You hastily wiped them away with the sleeve of your hoodie. Midoriya sniffled, ears perking at the sound of his first name tumbling so unexpectedly from your lips. He missed being called Izuku, and he'd always admired the fact that you never stopped using it. He felt more and more terrible with every word that left your lips, letting him in on your perspective, how you had been feeling because of him. Bored with you? Never. You were always so important, so unique to him. You were the only one who believed in him before he had a quirk.
I figured that, hey, maybe you were just busy, and so I didn't bother you. I thought that, hey, once you're not so busy, you'd call me, or text me, or something. But you didn't. And before I knew it, you had new friends. A new life.
You sniffled, unable to muffle the sound behind your sleeve this time, and Midoriya's eyes widened in horror when he realized that you were crying.
Without me.
Midoriya sobbed into his hands, the tears rolling freely as he cried. You looked over at his trembling form, letting your own silent tears dampen your hoodie sleeve. One thing about Midoriya that you had always admired was that he was never afraid to express himself. There wasn't a moment in the world that he was insincere with his emotions. Whenever he cried, He cried for real. So unlike you and many others, bottling up their emotions and hiding their faces from others. You couldn't watch this anymore.
I need to go.
You got up to leave again and Midoriya's head shot up the moment you moved, teary eyes watching as you stood.
Good night, Midoriya.
And with that, you walked away. Midoriya let his head fall into his hands. He pulled at his hair in frustration, clenching his fists so tightly his knuckles started to bruise. He cried harder than he had in a long time, muttering a million sorries into the night, in hopes that if he said it enough, you'd hear him and forgive him. But just like he did when you waited for him to call, to text, to say something, you stayed quiet.